But either way, my name is Mike Lyborg. I run the security program at Swimlane, which is pretty awesome because we actually use our own tool in our SOC and in our enterprise. So we manage all of our enterprise IT to include all of our customer data. We kind of automate everything. So I just took a snapshot and looked at this week. We've done over 40,000 automations. So we just continue to automate the world of cyber and information security. But more importantly, with me today is Jonathan. And if you couldn't tell by our haircuts, maybe, we're both jarheads. So we went from being door kickers, physical security, and kind of transition more and more into the information technology and cybersecurity space. But I want to say thank you, Jonathan, for joining us here today. And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm Jonathan Kennedy. I'm the CISO of InComm Payments that's based here in Atlanta. We are a fintech that does a lot of payment processing. I know that's all in the back end and not in your face, but for a consumer to see us as a business, you walk into a Walmart, you see the wall of gift cards, that's our main business line. But we are a payment processing company, and I've been at InComm for 3 years now. I started off as the Director of Security Operations, and I moved into my new role as a CISO as of a year and a half ago.
So we're partners in this journey, right? One of the biggest things is like, why are we doing what we're doing? And why are we even here talking to you today? Well, we can automate everything and we can use AI and machine learning, but at the end of the day, what's super important is consider the human element. Right? We're not replacing necessarily analysts in the SOC. We're not replacing your IT staff. But what we are trying to do is make them more efficient. So when we look at how we do this in a business, a lot of it comes down to what are the different personas. So what do I want to see, for example? Maybe we want to focus on risk and talking to the board about showing and actually having real data to say this is our overall risk. For Jonathan and everybody else as well, as we're looking at maybe the SOC leads, what are we automating, why are we automating it, and how are we showing this? So we have to be able to kind of take the lessons learned, because just automating isn't necessarily going to solve all the problems in the world. We have to be able to consume that data so that we reduce the context switching. I believe IBM said it really well a couple of minutes ago, is, well, we may have 30, 40, 50, 60 tools in our stack, but if you're context switching all day long, then you're gonna copy and paste and you're gonna probably miss a couple of steps. And as well as not having the ability to automate all these flows, your human errors is going to increase, unfortunately. And then we have the security analyst role. Something to consider there is, as they're getting all the information, how can they make a timely decision? That is still the human element. Everything that we do is, at the end of the day, is how do you consume that information? So it's probably really hard to see, and we're not here to look at metrics and necessarily slides. We want to talk, and like I said, we want to make this interactive as well. But if you're measuring risk, and you're automating on the edge, a couple of things to consider is, are we only automating like MDR? Or are we automating it throughout our entire enterprise? So are we keeping IT informed? Are we keeping the leadership informed? Is the actions that have been automated, how they overall, what's the impact on our overall risk? How do we see the value that we're getting out of all of these different tools in our stack? Things to consider there is, everybody wants return on investment and all these metrics, but what are our flows and what can we make more efficient by automation? And then that last persona, but it's pretty much the most important persona, right? It's the consumer of the analysts or the SOC people that are actually working in triaging events. So now we're going to get to the smart people in the room here, but I want to kind of talk to Jonathan and see, because we didn't want this to be a vendor pitch. We want to be as interactive, right? So tell us a little bit about at InComm, what were some of the challenges? Why did you decide to automate, and how has Swimlane helped you get there?
Yeah, absolutely. Just out of curiosity, before I start talking, how many people work in security operations? SOCs, doing threat intelligence. Okay, how about GRC? Wow. Audit risk? So everyone else in executive, or what am I missing?
Security architecture.
Oh, architectures? Okay, yeah, I did miss out engineering. Engineering, I apologize. Okay, awesome. All right, so when I came to InComm, I was brought on as the director of security operations, right? So traditional SOC roles, led the threat intelligence team, and day one, or maybe not, like all the HR training, but like day three, I walk into the SOC, and I just walk over to one of the new guys that I met, and I said, hey, show me what you do, right? And he runs through, and the first thing I notice is he has at least 30 tabs open in his browser. I'm like, what's all this going on? And he's like, well, this is CrowdStrike, this is Exabeam, this is Splunk, this is this and this and this and this, right? And I go, okay, so walk me through this ticket. And so he starts bouncing around. He lost the session on this tool. He has to re-log in. He has to bounce back over to this, drag, copy, paste, all this kind of stuff. And I just asked him, I was like, how long do you spend bouncing around between tools for any given ticket? And he said, probably 85% of the time. And so that got me thinking, I was blessed coming into InComm because someone had a big checkbook and bought everything under the sun. I was walking around out there, and I think I own more than I don't. And there needs to be some sort of consolidated way to handle all of this information, right? And I'm not paying, or I don't want to pay someone and use their time to bounce around and try to get information from everything when these tools are supposed to be providing that. And I realized there was a need for SOAR, something to orchestrate all of this chaos into one single pane of glass, to use a buzzword from 3 years ago, right? But it's been a huge advantage for us going forward, and not just to help with the like metric of time, right? That's usually what automation, you track time, and the return on value. But really just the return on job satisfaction and happiness in the SOC after that point went through the roof, because people aren't trying to look up this IP address and IP void. They aren't trying to go out to VirusTotal. All of that is brought to them. They have all the information they need on one pane of glass, and their decision-making process is cut by 90%.
Thank you. Any questions for Jonathan right now? All right.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, when you moved to automation, how did your analysts react to that? Did they see it as a positive, or that they were going to lose their jobs? Or
I love that question. Yeah, so there is a connotation, right, of, hey, let's automate. We hear it in the news even, that robots are making the vehicles now, and like robots are going to take over everything. When I brought in Swimlane, the engineers at first were like, what's our objective here? I said, to make your lives easier. They're like, to make our lives easier, or to have fewer, of us? And I was like, no, it's to make our lives easier, right? We're wasting so much time and effort when we could be using this time for threat hunting and other fun things to actually, grow in our industry. Instead, we're trying to copy and paste IP addresses and pull down, email metadata. At first, there was a little bit of hesitation, right? Because they thought we were trying to get a little efficient with money. But since then, since they realized the purpose of what we were trying to achieve, all of them embrace it, right? And one of the best meetings that we have is, I come down and I talk to the SOC and I say, what sucks, right? And I literally say that. And they're like, well, we have to, so for the audit people, they say that PCI is awful, right? I hate gathering evidence, blah, blah, blah. And so we were like, all right, well, how can we automate that? So we plugged in all of the normal dashboards and evidence and queries that the audit team needs from Splunk and Exabeam and our other tools for PCI. When it comes time for PCI, we just type in a date field that we need, hit go, and it pulls down all of our evidence for us. And then audit just has it like that, as opposed to people staying on calls for weeks.
Good, thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
So your vulnerability backlog went to 0, right?
No. However, we have great visibility of our vulnerability backlog now.
Yeah, I just wanted to get a perspective on how that helped.
Yeah, definitely. So everyone is unique, right? And I wish I could say, hey, we know where all these vulnerabilities are, and we're going to hit a magic button, everything restarts at once. As a fintech that does payment processing, we have to deal with milliseconds, right? And if one of our systems or databases goes down for 20 minutes, that's millions of transactions that can't be processed, right? So imagine you're trying to swipe your debit card and it just doesn't work. You have the money, but you don't know why it doesn't work. Well, we patched something, didn't test it at a lower level, and now your debit card doesn't work, right? So, however, the visibility that I can portray to the board of directors, my board, like my C-level and everyone else, it gives me the power to come back and say, hey, this is the kind of stuff that we need to be worried about. It's not FUD, like, hey, like ransomware is horrible. Yes, we all know that, right? But this is actually our problem, right? And so then I get the resources to help fix that.
I think to add to that as well, something that we're doing internally, right? So we have our product, but as we determine that we identify new vulnerabilities in our application stack, or possibly on an endpoint, is then having the ability to go on CAB, or as CISOs known exploitables, right? So now this is part of that automation, saying, okay, we found a new vulnerability, let's just go automatically see if it's on the CAB. If it's on the CAB, let's prioritize it, and then let's notify all the stakeholders, and like saying, hey, we probably need to do something because this is actively being exploited in the wild. Versus, it's a moderate or medium vulnerability somewhere in a system that is not connected to the internet necessarily. All right, let's deprioritize that and still focus, keep it in the backlog, still measure and track time, so we can then measure those efficiencies over time. And when we have the ability to capture years of data of saying, this is where we started, this is where it gets real fun, like this is where we started in 2022. And this was our mean time to respond or detect, or our dwell time overall. And at the end of 22, to then show the board, this is where we're at because of automation, right? But also taking everything in bite-sized chunks because I think there's risk and we have to consider that human element, right? When we have some government organizations that, to that point, like, well, are we being automated out of a job? No, and they went from like tier 1, and they went to continuous education. They promoted them all to like tier 2 and tier 3, and they now have more fun than playing whack-a-mole, right?
So if you wanted a phrase to scratch down from something I say today, I've always lived by this in security operations, the 1-10-60 rule. So I actually got this from Dimitri at CrowdStrike back in the day, but 1-10-60 stands for your tools have 60 seconds to detect that something has happened, right? That there's some sort of event. Your analyst has 10 minutes to determine whether or not it's a true or false positive. If they can't make a determination, then they automatically escalate it, right? And then through all of your tech and your knowledge combined, you should have 60 minutes to fully remediate an incident. And that's based upon the known breakout time of foreign actors. Russia's about a 38-minute breakout time, but then it drastically expands, like China's about 2 hours, right? When we first started this, when I joined InComm, the 1-10-60 rule, we were tracking how long it took, and we were way over an hour, right? But we realized that 90% of the work was just gathering information. Logging into SolarWinds, does someone have a token available to get into our PCI environment, right? So like all these just-in-time privileges, but when you combine all the APIs together, it moves at the speed of light, right? So when all that information is available, we're averaging about 8 to 15 minutes now for a full response.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, sir.
So you have your SOC team, you asked them what the problems were, and then you mentioned you went to your engineers to build it. Were your folks in the SOC able to automate this tool, or did you have to go to your engineers to get the tool set?
Gotcha. So if you couldn't hear, his question was, when I asked my SOC about what's painful, was the SOC able to actually perform and build the automations, or did it have to go to an engineering group? The answer is both, right? At the very beginning, we took a lot of engineering time to think about how we actually want to lay this out. one of my incident responders is also a computer scientist geek and a brilliant Python coder. And he dove straight into this and just get this operational for us and these beautiful dashboards and everything like that. Since we have our foundation, the SOC analysts who have no coding background are able to use the low code is what you're calling it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so like the low code plugins to drag and drop and get everything together. We still heavily get deep into the code because everyone has different problems, right? And that's one of the reasons why I chose to go with Swimlane is because if you're a salesperson in the room, there's two ways to get me off the phone. One is to consistently try to convince me what I want, and the other is to give me some sort of metric about 100% of something. Right? Like there was a fishing company a few years ago that told me they stopped 100% of fishing, and basically after a few more words, I said, "I'm never talking to you again." Right? It's obviously a lie. You can't do that. But so Swimlane does not or force upon you what they think you need, right? There's a few SOAR platforms out there, with some giant companies that call it SOAR, right? But it's you have this integration with this app and it does these 4 things, and that's it, right? Well, those 4 things don't necessarily apply to me, and you're missing the other 16 I need. Swimlane has the open, API connections and the coding where you can, as long as you can dream it, you can build it, right? And that's what we really love about it. Absolutely.
One thing to kind of, go ahead.
One common mistake I've seen is over-indexing on what you're trying to automate. How do you go about keeping your automation focused automation?
It's a good question. He said, that some people go, like too broad with what they're trying to automate, and how do we stay focused? It goes back to that same meeting, like the "What Sucks Today" meeting, right? We always look at what automations are actually working, and if there's any that are actually hindering work, like just taking up too much of the processing power of our tools or our devices. Is there too much information, right? Because you could absolutely do the opposite, have a lot of automations pull everything in, but now you still have the same problem. It's just a flood of info, right? So we're constantly looking at what we actually use. We actually have the capability to see what automations trigger and everything like that during the day. If something is working at 99% and used for everything, then we know that's very valuable to us. If something only triggered once in the past 60 days, maybe that's not something that we need running in the background all the time, right? So we just keep focused based upon the latest trends that are impacting us, and also what the analysts want is really the key is to listen to your analysts who are actually using the tool every day.
I think you brought out, did I answer your question, sir? Something else that's really important, right, is when you start your automation journey, something to consider is we all know what's good, and we all know what's really bad. So if you focus on automating those, so if you look at it like a horizontal bar chart, right, you know what's good and you know what's bad. But it's all that unknown in between, right? That's our risk. That takes time, takes a lot of research, digging. If we automate away the known, good, no bad, and then we take slices out of that unknown. Now we by the end of maybe in a year, maybe your automation journey, your company's automation journey is a 3-year path, right? But in 3 years, the unknown should be pretty narrow. And now all that manual labor that people used to do, and it doesn't even have to be security. It could be, I was supposed to ask Jonathan this question, like what are we doing, or what are you doing outside of the SOC, right? But we do, like in our environment, for example, RFID cards, right? Like as you come in and going in and out of secure areas in our building, like that all goes there. So for the audit, we have, and we can also see all the patterns. But maybe it's a maintenance crew that is trying to get access to a restricted facility. Like that's an alert. Historically, that would go into the IT and your physical security teams, right? But what if there's downstream effects in your data center or something else? Now you can glue it all together because you orchestrated, you tied all of these very disparate systems together. So I'm going to ask you, Jonathan, sure. What are the things that you're doing outside of the SOC?
Yeah, so I also have a hand in fraud prevention as well. So we have a lot of integrations with like tools like Palantir and things like that we use to combat gift card and prepaid debit card fraud. And there was no way for us to do live consuming of cards, is what we call it, right? So if a card is known to be fraudulent or been tampered with, we put it into consumed in our database so that the victim doesn't lose their money, right? And we are also kind of doing some stuff with the victim assisted scams. That's kind of still in the head, trying to help us out with that. But when we detect fraud, we actually have Swimlane go into our APIs and our databases and kill that card so that the attacker doesn't use it before the person can get their funds back. So there's a lot, more than just like security operations that this can be used for. A more practical one today is we stopped giving monthly memberships for parking garages because we don't require people to come into the office. They still have the option to, of course. When someone comes in and scans their badge into the building, they automatically get emailed a parking validation sticker to get out of the parking garage, so they don't have to actually go anywhere and get one. And that's also tied into Swimlane through our HR system.
That's awesome. Yeah, and one thing, so my boss came to me many months ago, it's like, I need an overall risk report once a week, and then I want to do a roll-up once a quarter or monthly as well. Like I think everybody here has done these, right? These fancy spreadsheets with charts and everything else. So yeah, we took some Python script, used our low-code interface, and then we kind of glued it all together. Now it emails it. Like, okay, he wants it by 1700 on a Tuesday afternoon. You know what? At 16:55, Bob's your uncle. Here's all the data that you asked for the last 7 days. Oh, you wanted aggregate and roll-up metrics for the last month. That it might have taken us 40 hours to build that one scheduled reporting facility, kind of cron job, and everything that goes into that, getting the layouts, the charts, everything right. But what's the return on investment? That's now we never have to worry about it. Yeah, we'll go and tweak it. But if you're doing something that takes you 4 hours a week, I'm making that up, but it probably could take some of us 4 hours a week to do these reports, right? The return on investment is 10 weeks. So why not spend the 40 hours to go and do it and then not have to worry about it? Nothing to do about really security. It's all reporting and management and measuring the efficacy of your programs, right? And you're using real data, like raw data that is in your system to produce these artifacts. How are we doing on time? 2 minutes. One last, actually, any questions? Because I'm more interested in questions than us talking here. Go ahead, sir.
How do you protect the integrity of your Python code now?
Great question. So a lot of, we use code scanners and supply chain as part of it to make sure that all the libraries that are in as part of the stack. So we go all the way downstream to make sure that we use also peer reviews. So it's kind of a bit of a manual process as part of that as well. I don't know, Jonathan, you guys do
For us,
anything?
we have a GitHub repository that requires signatures like when you're committing. And we also do peer reviews as well, of course. We have a development environment that we always test everything in first before we send it to production. Obviously a wild asterisk or something somewhere that would possibly modify a firewall rule would be great if we just pushed that without testing. But that's how we protect it.
Does that answer your question, sir?
That's good.
I think I saw one more question here in the crowd. Anybody else?
Yes, since we're on the slide, what is the greatest obstacle or challenge automation poses for the organizations that might not have all the funding or capital to invest in their security infrastructure?
So I don't know if this directly answers it, but I think it's an important point to say. Automation is a scary-ish word if you don't already have it, but the barrier to entry these days is very, very low. There were tools like this, like 10 years ago or like 15 years ago that would make it so that anyone who doesn't have a coding background can come in and start automating things. You don't have to have a grand plan on fixing everything in the company at once. You can start small and just start building it upon that. The support you get, something cool at Swimlane is they do these things called swim meets. They invite customers and they kind of just say, hey, look at this cool thing I built the other day, right? And then you share ideas like that. There's lots of forums and help guides, but you don't have to know how to code. You could just know how to drag and drop, like things and link them together, and then all of a sudden you're just getting rid of one little thing at a time, and all that adds up in the end.
If you have any other questions, please swing by our booth. If you want to see it in action, come and see our team. We're at the very far wall. But if nothing else, I just want to say thank you, Jonathan. So let's give a good hand.